What's up, fellow lords of gaming, and welcome back to the channel. We're jumping in to take a look at the Dune Awakening patch notes, and let's get a little breakdown on these new deep desert changes. So without further ado, let's jump right on in. All right, guys. So we've got the deep desert PvE PvP balance, which in my opinion is jacked up, and we're going to talk about this. So first off, one of the main things they talked about was equipping rocket launcher modules. They're going to now decrease the top speed of scout ornithopters. If you haven't made it to the deep desert yet, essentially the scout ornithopter is the fastest vehicle in the game, and so you can basically equip rockets onto the scout ornithopter and basically just use that. It's a way around having to go to the assault ornithopter, and so those are dominated the landscape of the game. So now instead, those ornithopters are going to have this decrease in their top speed by 20% when you have the rocket launchers, and 10% for assault ornithopters. Realistically, I think they should have just taken away the ability for scout ornithopters to even equip rocket launchers. Just take that item away, so that way now they just have to be what they are: scout ornithopters. Assault is assault, scout is scout, and basically equipping assault ornithopters with rocket launchers makes sense, but having a scout and having something as heavy as rocket launchers on it just doesn't make sense. I get it that you're trying to hold to some Dune lore, but there are some things that simply just do not convert and make sense. That's my two thoughts on it. That scout ornithopter should be either for boost or for short range runs, like, you know, holding individual, like, you know, small level resources and stuff, but it should be stuck to scouting. And then your assault ornithopter should be what has all of the firepower against it. Nevertheless, this is the change that they're making right now. We'll let them see. Like, we're only 3 weeks into this game, so let's let them, you know, cook and bake. The biggest thing that I'm really happy about is visiting other sietches. So that's now the restrictions for you moving to other sietches has been removed. And so as long as you're on the same world, you can go to other sietches now, claim land on those sietches as well, or someone can claim land for you, and then you can basically, you know, get rid of it. So the max number of sub-feed consoles, though, that remains unchanged. So that's a really good one. I like this change overall. So now I want to jump into the full patch notes because we're gonna talk about the changes to the deep desert that they have here. But first up that I want to bring up to you guys is just let's look at what they said. So they've adjusted the PvE to encompass the entire southern half of the deep desert map. That means that PvE players that have no interest in PvP should be able to find what they want without engaging in PvP. Imperial testing stations, caves, and so forth found in this area are now thus PvE. Control points and shipwrecks, though, continue to be PvP throughout the entire map, which means you will find localized pockets of PvP within the PvE section still. So it works the same way as Haga Basin, where essentially when you go to a shipwreck, you go to a control point, those areas will be PvP up areas, and then they've basically cut the map in half. So I'm going to show you guys a map, so that way we can take a look at this and why this is a boneheaded decision, in my opinion. They want to maintain the risk versus reward, though, so the density of resources that are going to be in the northern half of the map, those areas are going to have more valuable resources. So large spice fields, the majority of control points, they're going to be in the northern part. So they also said how they've made some lower adjustments in terms of the loot reward. So you can see here, the lower half of the deep desert now offers PvE loot that is balanced towards sheer loot and PvE activities. You can find better loot in the more dangerous PvP area located further. So stupid. So stupid. The amount of medium spice fields has been reduced from 8 to 5. The number of active small spice fields has been increased from 20 to 22. And then the spawn rate of titanium and stravidium has been reduced in PvE areas, so that large quantities only spawn in the far out PvE areas. The respawn time of nodes is increased from 30 to 45 minutes. I'm going to get into why all of this is absolutely terrible and points out to knowledge of logistics, how it's bad inside this dev team. So let's go to that real quick, because I think I want to show this to you guys with a map. So number one, I'm going to show you just the fact that this exists lets you know already the idea behind cartography, the sync charts. They're not dealing with knowledge of like this is how we exist. So for instance, you know, it's a day since the Coriolis storm, 2 days maybe at best, and we already have a full sync chart online that basically is available to everyone. So there's no need to basically run in and get sync charts, right? It's the same way, like there are YouTube videos out there that you can see base building techniques and tips, and people are going to go to those base building techniques and tips, and they're going to basically do those. Now, does it make it a little bit easier for you to basically say that if someone built a base, that they can then just do with a Solido projector, they make a video of it, and then they shove it into the thing, and you have to buy theirs? Yeah, sure, of course. But realistically, there are navigation ways around some of the in-game type content to basically make your way. So I want to focus in on the map. So at current, or not current because the fix is live, but prior to these hotfix changes, what was when you got to the deep desert, you encountered this map, and like the first lower half area of that map was considered a safe zone. And so you would go to that safe zone, you could build out your place and so forth, right? Now, you would have to go deep into the desert, you know, to find these spice field locations, the Stravidium, the Titanium, you know, the large spice fields, the ring mouth spice fields, all of those things you would basically end up having to go deeper and deeper into the desert. What that meant for whether you were a PvE player or a PvP player is that you had to extend what they call a logistics train, meaning that I could keep my base in Haga Basin, but I had to plan because I essentially knew that I was here. I had to fly maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 tiles to get all the way to the deepest part of the desert to participate in those things. That means I had to be concerned about my fuel. That means I had to be concerned about my rockets. That means I had to be concerned about other players and my players and when I was going. Now what they've effectively done is they've said, guess what? We're going to extend the PvE zone all the way to about row E, so half the map. So half of this PvE area is going to basically be encompassed in PvE. So everything all the way up to E is now going to be PvE specific. But if you come across any of the shipwrecks, control points, those areas are still going to be PvP focused in those areas. Why is this bad? So essentially, by cutting the map off in half, you have lessened the logistics train that is required by top level guilds to get to the deep desert and farm resources, which means they are going to get ahead of any solo duo type player base. And it's going to also be a means for them to limit access to resources by solo duos, even small, medium-sized guilds to basically target. Because let's take a look at this. For instance, if I was a large guild, I would have to run my entire team all the way up into the deep desert, maybe build a base, maybe have another base here, and then, you know, like at F or something like that, or E, and then have a base all the way back in Haga Basin. So because once the Coriolis storm comes, I gotta pull back on all of those egress is what we call it. I gotta egress all of those resources back to the Haga Basin, so that way when the wipe happens, I don't lose out on anything basically that I have inside these basins. Now what you've effectively done, because the PvE zone is far extended, is you've basically now put it inside of E, and so these guys can basically move to E and now only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tile sets to get to the deepest part of the desert. That means that also gives them ability to control the entirety of the map, because now a guild can go out and set up in the midst of the map here. They don't have to worry about protecting or defending anything below E. So I can set up here, and what's the easiest route here? Just think about it from this perspective. If I maintain control over G5, F4, F5, F6, and E5, I've essentially controlled the center of the map. This is like if we were fighting in the UFC and I'm controlling the center of the octagon. I'm giving you little places to move now. So now a guild can set up inside that center zone, and that means from here they can send out vehicles and ships only within 5 squares. That means that all of your PvP zones that are in your PvE areas, guess what? They can also take over those zones as well. All your Stravidium and all of your titanium areas that below the E zone, guess what? They can take over those as well, because it's a lot easier for them to sit up in the center of the map and move 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4 squares away from their centrally located base in the center of the map. Whereas before, they would have had to go all the way up to the northern part of the map, maybe do something over here, and then you could basically move around in these other areas and maybe, perhaps, not run into these players. It was a bad idea from the beginning because it doesn't force any of these large guilds to create these logistics trains in order to gain resources and extract resources from the deep desert. Now they get to just set up one place inside of here and control the entirety of the map. Like I've said to you before, the map's just not that big. I could see if you were playing something like EVE Online and you were trying to basically say something like this, that's different. But this map is as large as it is, and it's a decent size. It is not as large as you may think it is. It just isn't. And while they may expand the deep desert in the future, it's still not going to probably be as large as you might want it to be, so that way you run the risk of basically not running into anyone in the desert, right? So essentially what they've set up here is just bad business, and it's kind of like reduces the value of the updates that they've made to vehicles, specifically like the Scout Ornithopter. Well, essentially, if you said the Scout Ornithopter is going to receive a negative 20% movement speed, the Assault Ornithopter is going to receive a negative 10, well, guess what? Who cares? Who cares? Because essentially when I get to the northern section, I've got less distance to move. It'd be entirely different if I went to I, because I saw that the guilds were all the way up in here and I was a solo duo or small guild type players, and I ran from the Haga Basin, took the area up here and got to this area and then ran into hostilities. Well, guess what? I need that speed so that way I can make this movement all the way back to the Haga Basin. But now I only have to make it back to E, so it's half the distance. So reducing the 20% to 10% movement speed by nature doesn't really necessarily affect very much, because you've reduced the amount of distance that I have to cover to get back to a location where I'm safe. It's a bad decision. Like I said, what they should have done, what they should do is make the deep desert a PvP flaggable zone in certain areas, PvE specific zone in certain areas, and then PvP set zones in certain areas. So for instance, if I get a capture point that pulls up and we as Atreides go over there and we capture that zone, it should flag to a PvE type zone. And so now you generate something towards the Landstrat system for anyone who is in that area who is Atreides. And if I was a Harkonnen and I took over a capture point, guess what? It's the same there. If we go to spice fields and spice blows, those things should be timed events where they basically happen. People can watch for them, see them happen, and then they can run to those resources, and that way they can be engaged in those battles. Because maybe if you looked at it this way and you said on G or F3 right here, we've got a capture point. That's Atreides and Harkonnen, or Atreides or Harkonnen, and then over here at E4, that was Atreides or Harkonnen. But now both of these guys notice the spice blow that's happening over at E5. Well, guess what? If they both notice that, that gives them both reason or recourse to basically go and get after that spice blow and compete for that resource. Or they can fight each other for the resource, for the control of the capture points throughout the week inside of F3 and E4. And then whoever has control of that area more than likely wins control of that spice field. And then you make your other areas in the game PvP flaggable or PvE flaggable. But doing what they've done has just kind of upended and not really done what I think a lot of players and even they probably think, unless this was their intent, so that way they can just be like, well, this is what you guys asked for, so we gave it to you, but it didn't work out, so now we have to collect more data before you get time. There's enough games out there that implement RTS type strategy, PvP type zoning, that there should be enough information where this should not be a learning lesson, but it should be a research lesson to basically find out what it is. This just defies any type of planning, operational planning that you do for areas, and it just defies everything. You know what I mean? Like, you've essentially just given the PvPers control of a map, especially since all the zones that are basically shipwrecks and stuff like that, they're still going to now have to be able to control those areas with very little to do. So let's take a look at some of the other things that they have inside of here. So you can notice the vehicles about the rocket launchers. We went over those. They also fixed the issue where the ornithopters were crashing and then just like you were gliding away because for whatever reason you jumped out of your plane. I guess maybe you thought you were Battlefield and you decided to jump out of the plane to try to launch some rockets or something like that. They've taken that away, so that way the plane just falls straight down. Although they do note that if your plane falls in quicksand, you're going to have something where you get on top of the vehicle, so that way you can basically mitigate that. You see that they also removed the restrictions. We talked about that for sieges. That's really good. And then you can see they increase game stability, stuff like that. There are some other fixes that they've done inside of here. One of the specific like interaction bugs that I'm happy that they fixed is this combat one, where essentially like there were corpses that are lying on the ground, but then when you start to go to do melee attacks against somebody, it would basically almost act as an invisible wall to you be able to initiate your attacks. I saw that way too often, and I'm happy that that one is fixed. So you can see they're making sure to try to address some of the exploits and vulnerabilities, like basically going out and stealing people's helos, putting them in, having client freezes and stuff like that. So all of those things they essentially are looking at fixing. Same thing with like traveling and your ornithopter basically getting lost because you transition from the deep desert back to Haga Basin and something went wrong. My main objection to all of this isn't the fact that they're trying to facilitate what the community wants. It's just there wasn't a lot of thought behind this. I don't think many players expected for this fix to be implemented within the time frame that it has been. It was literally like maybe a couple of days ago, and now they implemented. But I think you went the route where you haven't really considered or researched what it is that you should be researching to figure this stuff out. This is just a bad decision to just say, well, I'm extending the PvE zone, but you've kept everything here. So now my Stravidium, my Titanium that's inside here, the larger guild can still control those points easier, and you put them on larger cooldowns, so you're locking out the solo duos and, you know, smaller guilds by doing what you've implemented, because you've given the PvP players, the griefers, the gankers, the tryhards, the lifers, whatever you want to call them, you've given them less area of the map for which they need to actually control, for which they need to actually travel and do transportation logistics. By reducing the space, you facilitated them even more. And I just don't think you thought this one through. You're gonna have to come around at some point and wipe the smugness, because I know you think you did something great, but you're gonna have to wipe the smugness and realize like maybe I should go into researching how RTS strategy, operational planning, and things like that work if what you're trying to do is create a system within inside of a game where you want PvP to triumph. You need to readjust whether or not you're going with combined arms inside of the game versus guerrilla warfare. That's what you need to look at. I don't know how we still lingering on this idea of combined arms in a Dune game where the worm and the desert is a negative to you. It's a negative impact. So I'm sitting in a deep desert and I'm gonna have tanks, spice walkers, all of these things that are on the ground that should be subjected to the worm at all time and cannot defeat the worm. And then I'm gonna basically say now the squat ornithopters and also ornithopters are gonna rule the roost. It doesn't make sense. Air superiority is going to always be the thing in any type of this battle space. What you should be focused on is the guerrilla warfare type tactics, and maybe setting up the deep desert as like a PvP PvE DMZ zone with controlled areas of interest, controlled areas of timed events, and PvP flaggable areas inside the game. So maybe where we have like these small level resources, these are PvE i.e. PvE, PvP flaggable areas. So then if there is a small spice blow or something like that, and we can't communicate and say, hey, we will share this, or, you know, and you can take it, I'll go find another one, then it becomes something where we can just say, hey, let's flag up and we'll fight over the resource. And that way it becomes like your Conley system in the Haga Basin, where it's like, Conley, hey, we've just engaged in a fair 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, or whatever like that. That's what it needs to be. But forcing this free-for-all system inside the deep desert is just, it's asinine. It just doesn't exist. Not in the real world. It doesn't exist in the Dune world. It only exists inside the machinations of Joel as the creative director, and just not willing to just do the research because there's so many other games. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comment section below. Is this enough? Was this like something that you guys really felt like that like really was going to help you? Or did you feel like that maybe I'm just thinking it too far? Let me know in the comment section. Until next time, guys. Peace.